Let's talk about INEC and the APC opposing the broadcast of the presidential election.
What do you expect?
And you yourself said you'll be shocked.
Look, let's be clear. Truth dies in darkness. Let me repeat myself. Truth dies in darkness. If you broadcast the tribunal's proceeding, INEC and the APC and multiple agencies of this fraudulent government will be exposed for what they are. They've done all their shenanigans, had their circuses, had their orchestra. We're now on the home run, where the tires hit the road. And what you're saying is that INEC, the APC, will do everything they can to make sure Nigerians don't see the truth, or at least, as best as possible, veil it. If you're seeing it live, it becomes difficult to distract the people with all the many shenanigans they will bring, because they will be throwing maximum distractions at the people instead of allowing them to see the evidence that will be coming out of the court. So take it for granted that the APC, INEC would do everything to fight against it. Whether the tribunal would elect to allow itself to become a force for good, or whether it would allow itself to be forced to become complicit in a crime against the Nigerian people, is entirely up to it. But even if it rules against allowing cameras, I would not hold that against the tribunal or deem that a sign of its partiality in one way or the other, because the truth is, it is not something that had been allowed in our courts, but that is not to suggest that it is not desirable. It's done all over the world. Kenya did it. Why should it be such a big deal for us? We love pointing out examples all over the world, but that's because we've been left behind by everyone else. But Kenya did it, and they made sure they finished hearing the petitions before any swearing in was done. If we are truly desirous of being members of the human community, we have to start acting human. And humanity says, when there are opportunities for progress, advance. It's always about enlightened selfish interest. It is in our enlightened selfish interest as a people to enlighten ourselves, educate ourselves by following the proceedings of that tribunal. So it's up to the court to decide whether it wants to do that or not.
Now let's take it from your last statement, stating the fact that all petitions should be heard, like we've seen in other climes, before the swearing in.
Yeah.
But May 29 is just around the corner, and processes are ongoing to ensure that, that the program runs, goes ahead. But Nigerians are also skeptical about the Supreme Court upturning that election. And concerns are also being raised about a vacuum in government, and Nigerians also kick against the interim national government. What are your concerns?
Number one, those who speak to vacuum are obviously not well advised as to the legal position. There is no vacuum. The Constitution provides not for an interim government, but that the incumbent, I don't know the specific sections, as I've always managed to explain to all, if you are looking for legal references, talk to your lawyers. I'm retired. But I believe there are sufficient provisions in the Constitution, as fraudulent as I hold it to be. There are sufficient provisions there that allows the incumbent to continue for the period of that interim. Is there. So it's not about, and I've been hearing this nonsense about interim government. We didn't vote for an interim government. We voted for a president. We have courts for the purposes of resolution of disputes. There are disputes clear ones about these elections, and there are constitutional imperatives that are being overlooked as well. And you don't, if the constitution is clear, you don't start all this dicing left and right, but because even though there is a constitution, both the drafters of that constitution and the people are miles apart, and at the end of the day, it is not a reflection of our will. So it's easy for those who know that the constitution is meaningless, because that's what it actually is, to keep trampling all over it the way they are. However, we are sworn to follow the legal path. Where that leads, we'll know at the end of the day. If the legal path in their own interpretation includes swearing in a man who is clearly not the elected president, there is a constitutional provision for determining the elected president. 24 states and 25% of FCT. I didn't write that. It is not something that you argue. It's there clearly, 24 states. And I read English language and linguistics up to a point, even though I didn't graduate, and the meaning of hand in law is established. So if somebody now sat down, Mahmoud Yakubu sat down, in spite of that clear provision of the constitution, he writes a certificate of return in the middle of the night, and his minion in Adamawa did the same thing. He went after the one in Adamawa, but he wants to be covered in glory. It tells you there is a problem with the way our country is run. But again, our own decision at the level of the Obidati campaign organization from day one was always clear. Follow the court. Let the legal system prove itself either an accomplice to the ruiners of Nigeria, or indeed the last hope of the common man. Because our very humanity is what is being challenged. Our right as a collective to make a choice. If Bola Ahmed Tinubu had won, if Atiku had won, and it was clear that this was the result of the election, they will clap, congratulate them, wish the Nigerian people luck, sit back, probably prepare for another election. We're Democrats. And I'm speaking for myself. I would have gone back home and started preparing for another election. But Bola Ahmed Tinubu did not win an election. He's attempting to steal one. With the connivance of Yakubu, it is now up to the courts to decide if they are party to that crime. It's not for daily fountain.
Now, let's also look at this as the 10th National Assembly also. We've had jostling for the top Senate leadership. What are your thoughts on?
You see, I left Nigeria, I believe it was on the 12th of April. And I came back on Wednesday, just a few days ago. I deliberately stayed away from all news Nigeriana until a few days before my return. And when I started checking the news, I saw the Senate Chief Whip, I think Ojikalu is, I saw Akpabio, and I'm being told, what's that one's name now?
Barau.
Barau.
Barau, yes.
I just saw a whole jostling, and I was saying to myself, here we go again. Here we go again, because it's almost like we take every opportunity to normalize insanity. Every opportunity. We don't seem capable of missing the opportunity to normalize madness. It's bad enough that we have a career criminal poised to take over the presidency of our country. But now, it's almost like there is a competition to enthrone the worst of the thieves. Orji Uzor Kalu was the one who was resident in some jail until some judicial abracadabra brought him out. He's still awaiting his trial, if that trial would ever hold. But now, he's actually being named as a contender for the Senate presidency of Nigeria. Akpabio, wasn't that the one that Keyamo was busy prosecuting before he became the junior minister
The NDDC.
in NDDC? Oh, wow. So now, here is the thing. Our situation, you might see me seeming to be laughing, but I'm weeping. I am weeping. I am weeping. I'm not weeping from the tear gas that stung our eyes when we were busy fighting for this nonsense we are calling democracy today. I'm weeping for all the young men and women who died to bet this thing we are calling democracy. If indeed the dead could look back, how would they be feeling right now when you're actually... And then, what about Orji Uzor Kalu's cellmates, the people who are in that jail with him? They are now seeing him. And then, oh, yeah, when I was in the US, I was told the tales of Nigerians who had become lost in Chicago and other places because they didn't have papers, drug convicts of all sorts, who are actually celebrating because now they can come back since one of their own. So I'm asking myself, how do we as a people, in good conscience, keep anyone in prison for stealing if we are enthroning the crooks? How? Exactly. Look, we seem to imagine that we live in some cocoon and the world cannot see us for what we are. I traveled to America in February 2010. It was in the, I think the Pant bomber was in December 2009. So I traveled to America 2010 February and I went in through Houston. I was treated like a terrorist simply because for the first time in Nigerian history, one of us attempted suicide internationally. And it was so shocking for me because I was used to us being profiled as drug couriers. Yes. But to be profiled as a terrorist was a new experience. But now, the one who is saying he wants to be president, they know what he is. The whole world knows what he is. They know that is not his name. They know that's not his qualification that is parading. They know he didn't work in the places he claimed that he has worked at. They know that's not his real age. They know that everything about him from top to bottom is fake. That's on one hand. Then you have the Senate. It's a jostle for power amongst crooks. It's a race to the bottom of the pile.
We've had an uptick in killings in recent times, and for example, like what happened in Plateau State. I would like to ask you, I mean, as the twilight of this administration comes to bear, what's the specific step should the security forces?
What security forces? Let's be clear about something. Muhammadu Buhari, let me be very clear, is the one responsible directly for each and every one of the killings in Nigeria. Is the president. That's on one hand. But more importantly, he is complicit in the killings. He is complicit because he's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. How is it that armed men would operate in a community for hours and nobody would engage them? How is it possible that ethnic militia are like better armed than the police force? That they have resumed their killing, it should be no surprise to anyone. Nobody had engaged them. It wasn't like they were apprehended. They were simply on holiday. They were simply on holiday. And I am shocked when people in southern Nigeria particularly imagine that these things are far away. It's not. People are already being picked off like chicken on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. If anyone imagine that any of these would disappear because we wish it to disappear, they're lying to themselves. These things are already with us and they'll be here for a while, for as long as there is no political will to engage with the madness. There are too many evidences of state complicity. Commander Olawumi spoke, I think it was about 2 years back, and it was very clear about the list of terrorist sponsors in this government that have been handed to Muhammadu Buhari. What has he done about it? Absolutely nothing. The UAE handed over a list of terrorist financiers in Nigeria. They prosecuted the ones within their own jurisdictions and sent them to jail. They're already in jail. What has the one in Nigeria done? Nothing. There are multiple evidences of state-level complicity. The same security forces that could track Nnamdi Kanu all the way to Kenya to go and illegally abduct him has no way of knowing where any terrorist financier in Nigeria is. And we are talking about what can be done. What can be done is obvious. What has not been done is equally obvious. Who should be blamed is obvious. The fact of the matter is that the Nigerians being slaughtered in Nigeria are victims of rulership ineptitude, complicity, failures, and pure evil, because these are preventable deaths.
The airwaves have been washed with the recent court remanding Seun Kuti and police combing his home looking for exhibits based on his assault of a police officer who has yet been to be revealed by the Nigerian police force, and there seems to be a calculated attempt to continually hold him. And yesterday, a campaign was started to free Seun Kuti. What are your thoughts on this?
Thank you. By the time I came into the country, I think a day before I came, I heard the news. By the time I came in, I heard more. And what I am saying very clearly, I'm going to address this from different angles. The first angle I would address it from is the idiocy of the victims. The victims in this case being the Nigerian people themselves. Idiocy of the victim in the sense that they are dividing themselves as to what to support, who to support. The truth is what you must always support. I have no knowledge of what transpired before what was filmed, but I've had the benefit of hearing Seun's explanation, and his explanation was that his car was run into from behind and his daughter was almost killed in that car. So there was sufficient provocation. Whether that might be said to justify what took place afterwards or not is another ballgame entirely. So the police have a charge, assault on an officer. It took place on a bridge. My belief is that because he was not on the spot, they found themselves a basis for going to his house. But it should end there. This is purely a case of assault. That it has degenerated to Seun being in detention for almost a week now is ludicrous in the extreme. To now be reading comments online where some people are saying, oh, it's because he's not obedient, and some people are saying he's obedient. That is the division of the victims that I'm speaking to. The Nigerian police is not going to ask your political affiliation. before it assaults you. So Shehu slapped the policeman. How many Nigerians are daily beaten, assaulted, harassed, injured, killed by police excesses? I'm not excusing anything that Shehu might have done, but there is a need to deal with this humanely. And the people who are commenting on this should be careful. At the end of the day, Shehu is a Nigerian like them. He's got a wife, he's got kids. If he is dehumanized, it legitimizes the dehumanization of every other person. If we find a basis, any basis for that matter, to cheer on his ordeal, then it tells us about exactly how evil we are ourselves. So I think it is a time when Nigerians should first of all take a step back, be clear that this is not politics, and it should never be about politics. It is about the commonalities of our afflictions as a people. If they are doing this to Shehu, who has a name, we've moved. There are two episodes here. There was what is on video that all of us are seeing, and there is what is now following. Yorubas will say, "Ebu aloni town, abonita no." If Shehu didn't do so well, has the Nigerian police done better? Let me not aggravate the situation further, but I really think that the victims should find commonalities and stop dividing themselves and be talking about he's obedient, he's not obedient. It doesn't make any sense. Police is not going to ask what you are before he will shoot or kill or do whatever he's going to do. That's my view.